If you had a microscope and could look at a piece of a leaf, you would see thousands of tiny openings which branch out until the leaf has all of the materials it needs. What happens now?
All right, it's finally time to talk about 3D in After Effects. And I know some of you are super psyched about this, and others might feel a little bit scared, so I just want to say, don't sweat it. This isn't that complicated, okay? In After Effects, when you say 3D, what you're really talking about is 2.5D, generally speaking, okay? Because generally you're working with flat objects that are distributed in 3D space, okay? As opposed to like a fully modeled, like a sphere or a helicopter or something like that, which you could actually import into After Effects in certain ways and work with. But for the most part, what you're really dealing with are flat layers distributed in 3D space, okay? So let's jump into After Effects and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so I've made a new composition, 1920 by 1080, and I dropped a solid back here and I've called it my background. So far, so good, right? So what I'm gonna do is go up here and I'm gonna grab my rectangle tool and I'm gonna make a rectangle, right? Just like this, okay? And for the most part, I'm gonna kind of try to keep it so that it's pretty much one of the edges is right there in the center, right? Okay, cool. So, and actually then let me take this and duplicate this. And let me move this one over here so that they line up together and there's no gap. I think that's good. Or is that a gap? Okay, 1 pixel back. Fantastic. And let me grab them both and make sure they're right in the center. Cool. So, so far so good. I think you all know how to do that. Now, what you've probably all figured out by now is in order to make layers 3D, you have to press this button here, which looks like a little cube, okay? So it's pretty obviously like a 3D button. And when you do that, like for example with these 2 shape layers I made, and I press that on, now basically they're 3D layers, woo! And let's see, there's a couple changes here. If I look at the position, we'll see that instead of 2 values, an X and a Y, now things are listed as X, Y, and Z. Okay, and if you remember, the x-axis is the horizontal and the y-axis is the up and down. The z-axis is the depth axis, right? The back and forth. That's called z-space, all right? Depth, all right? So now you'll also notice that these, the little like anchor point for the layers, here, this one's easier to see probably. Now there's kind of this 3-way sort of trident thing, which is very different looking. And if you kind of hover over the green arrow, you'll see that that says Y right there. And that means that this can be moved straight up and down on the Y-axis only. Like even if I moved side to side, I'm not moving it side to side, I'm still moving it up and down, okay? Similarly, there's the X-axis here, handle, which you can grab and move things exactly just in that one way. And of course, it's sort of the hardest one to see, but there's the z-axis here too, and that allows you to move things kind of back and forth, all right? So that's another big change. And then finally, if we look at the rotation for these layers, you'll also see that the rotation is quite different. So there's now this orientation thing, and the rotation values are listed as X, Y, and Z as well. And then there's orientation, which is a way of kind of just setting something into the 3D space. And then there's X, Y, and Z rotation that you could additionally add on there. I usually use X, Y, and Z rotation more than orientation. Okay, that's just a personal preference. So here's what I wanted to show with this. All right, is that if I click on this layer here, okay, the anchor point right now I put on the side, okay, and that's great. And now this one, right now the anchor point's over here. And it's the same way to move the anchor point as before with the 2D layer. If I just grab my pan behind tool or Y, I could take this and move this over here and I can kind of snap it onto its own edge. And let me make sure that this is kind of snapped onto its own edge too, and it is. Great. So now with the rotation set up like this, all right, I can animate these 2 things kind of like doors. And this is what I wanted to show you at first, right? So what I want to do is set and I should explain, right, that if you think about it, there's X, there's Y, and then there's Z. And if we rotate along those axes, things behave a little bit different than you might think right away, okay? So if you have an object and it's going to rotate along the Y-axis, which is the up and down, it's going to rotate this way, right? Like a carousel, okay? Along its own central axis or wherever you've put that Y-axis. And if you rotate something along the X-axis, it's going to rotate like this. sort of like, I don't know, the only thing I can think of is like a hot dog rotating in one of those rollers at like 7-Eleven, which is a completely disgusting metaphor, I apologize, but that kind of rotation. And then Z rotation, oddly enough, is the exact same rotation that we've always been using, which is just kind of like this, right? So we got that going on. So what I want for these doors to open is for them to rotate on the Y-axis, the up and down, right? Sometimes that can be slightly confusing to think about. So I'm going to make keyframes for Y rotation for both of these, and then I'll move forward like a second, okay? And now, I need to rotate these out, and I need to make sure that I'm rotating them outward into space. And then let's just say I rotate them out to like on negative 120 on this one. Now for this one, it's going to be rotating the other way, so I have to rotate it a positive value, but since I want it to be symmetrical, I'm just going to add in 120 there, right? And now, if I press my work area to end there, we can preview this, right? And that's what it looks like. It's just two flat layers rotating in 3D space, okay? And I want to show you something else that's really cool here. So right now, there are these two button pull-down things here that I don't know if you've ever looked at. I haven't talked about them yet. And these have to do with 3D, all right? And it's pretty cool because After Effects, like pretty much every 3D program, allows you to look at your scene through different points of view, okay? So for example, if we look here, we could look two views and horizontal, all right? And what that means right now is, I'm going to back up a little on both of those, is that you see how this is lit up here? That means I've clicked into this, and this is the active camera. Even though there's no camera, anytime you make a 3D layer, it calls the front view the active camera, okay? You don't need a camera for this. And you don't need a camera for any 3D to work, all right? Say that again. This here, if we click here, now you see that this is lit up, and what this is the top view, all right? And let me actually, this would be easier to see if I took these and made them yellow or something. It'd be a little bit easier to see here, okay? So watch this animation in the top view. And again, we're looking straight down on these, so they're flat layers, right? And this is what it looks like. It rotates out like that, right? So you really are looking at this from the top and over here from the side, from the front rather, at the same time, okay? So can you visualize that? Right now they're on the same depth plane right here, and then as they rotate out like that, all right? I think you guys get that. So that's, really, really, really basic idea of 3D in After Effects. Let's take that one step farther or further, and I've made this little like scene here, okay? Let me double click this. And I'm actually going to go back to one view for a sec. So I made this little like really bad drawing of a little like cityscape with like some mountains in the background and the sun and the sky or whatever, okay? And I wanted to show you how you could set this up and achieve a kind of a parallax scrolling kind of animation here, all right? So first thing I'm going to do is my sky, I do not need to be a 3D layer because that's not going to move with any parallax because the sky is like so far in the distance. It's not even really like a thing in real life, okay? So I'm gonna just lock that and not make that 3D, but everything else I'm gonna grab and I'm gonna turn on the 3D button, right? Now, let's go and let's actually look at this in the top view again. Right now, all of these layers are distributed evenly in space. They're all in the same plane, which is, if we look at this, if we press the P for position, they're all, in the terms of the depth, in terms of the Z, they're all at 0, which defaults to being right in the center of the comp space, okay? But if I take City 1, for example, and I grab it by this Z handle, I can move this forward, right? And here, if I look at this with two views, we'll see, and I make this one the active camera, right? We'll see that by moving this layer up, oopsies, gotta grab it, I can see it there in my window that it's kind of moving forward, right? Great, so let me take that and move it forward, and let me take City 2 layer and move that forward too, all right? And just kind of distribute these evenly. And then City 3 I'm gonna leave in the middle here, and then the mountains, I'm gonna zoom back a little, and I'm gonna push those way back into the background, all right? And then the sun, all right, which is like, I don't know, millions and millions and millions of miles away in real life, okay? I'm gonna take and I'm gonna move that along the Z-axis, back here, way back in the background, okay? So now I've distributed them in space, but two things. One, I need to kind of raise and lower them to make the scene look a little bit better at the start. And two, when you move things way into the background, I think the keen After Effects observer will note that they have then gotten really small. And we need to kind of counter scale them back up so they get to pretty much be about the same size as they were before we move them back. All right. So now that I've got these distributed in space, let me go back to one view for my active camera and kind of work on this a little bit. So the sun is, if you see the bounding box of the sun now, it's really tiny. So I could scale that back up so that that box gets back up to the center, so that it's basically the same size it was, even though it's way back and I've scaled it up. The illusion is that it's the same size that it started out as, okay? And that's pretty much what I'm going to do here. So the mountains, I'm going to actually scale those up as well to something like here. And I might even, just for the heck of it, or I'll do that later. I was thinking I might need to spread the mountains out a little bit, like on the horizon side, but that's cool. So now here, I'm going to take this, and this has been moved back, right? So if I solo this, okay. Oh, actually, this is the one that I left in the same position, so that's fine. I was going to say if I solo, let's see, City 2, okay. This is now here, and let me scale this back down, right? And actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave that scaled up. And City 1, I'm going to leave those scaled up. Let me unsolo those. And now let me take City 1. I think I'm going to move this down. And City 2, and I'll move this down a little bit, right? And even City 3, I think I'll move that down too. Or maybe I'll take all of them and move them up a little bit. Just trying to get this so it looks like a nice scene so I can see the mountains there in the background. I guess that's fine. Uh-oh, fiddle. Okay, let me see. I think you want them to look like they're getting kind of smaller as they go down, right? And maybe I will sort of scale my mountains out a little bit this way because they look a little tall. Cool. So, great. Now, they're all 3D layers, like I said, and they're all distributed in space. So, for example, if I made a null object, right? And I made that 3D. Yes, that's right. You can make your null objects 3D. And basically what that does is it just gives you the same X, Y, and Z position. And it gives you the multiple rotation options and stuff like that. So now if I parent 3D layers to a 3D null, I can move those layers all in 3D space, okay? And if you want now, all right, if you love cameras and you just can't wait to put a 3D camera on stuff, which I don't really recommend at this point, you can just call your null your camera, all right? And then really, it's the same thing, basically, okay, except for a couple of functions. And now you see, now that I have 3D, this is a 3D object, right? When I move my null, I can kind of get a parallax animation going on here. You see that? And that's because things are distributed in 3D space. And let me now, I can also like zoom in on this and have like a nice parallax like that too, right? See that? What I would need to do actually to do something like that is select all my layers except for the null. And just remember, because these are Illustrator layers, to always press this sunshine button here and then they will look sharp, okay? And let me set this back to 0 for 1 sec. So let me show you how I could do that like animation. I could very easily start even back farther, right? And kind of like maybe there and put a position keyframe there and go like, I don't know, 5 seconds. This is a really long comp. And move this forward like, through all this. And I could even like move up a little, because the parallax will be happening like that too. So, I could always do that. And then I've got a cool, like fun little animation that just sort of rolls through 3D space. You'll notice it definitely takes my machine a little bit longer to process this with the 3D space, but I think you could see the illusion at work, and it's really cool, right? And obviously if you made like a better drawing, it would be way better. But here we go. Let's play this down. Or we'll just wait. All right, and there you can see that the parallax illusion is really nice. I mean, I think I'd need maybe a little bit more separation between this lighter layer and this middle colored layer or whatever, but I think you can see how fun that is. And for example, we could still like, I'm gonna split the difference there and just say I'll put this at 200. Okay. Now we could also do like a left to right scale, parallax thing as well, which I think looks really cool. So let's see, we could set this sort of where it starts working about here, right? And make a X position keyframe, and then go to the end and now drag this over this way. And it looks like I would need to probably make more art to really extend this out, but this would have a kind of cool parallax effect like this, right? And it's just nice because the After Effects engine takes care of all the math for you in terms of the parallax, which is really sweet. Once you set things in 3D space, it basically does the rest. And a null object is amazing for moving this stuff around, okay? Like I said, you really don't need a camera unless you need depth of field or the aperture, a couple other things like the zoom or whatever, right? But this looks really fun and cool. And it definitely has the illusion of 3D. But like I said, 2.5D, okay? And the final thing I want to do is actually show you that you can actually build a full 3D object in After Effects. It basically has to be like a cube or a rectangle, okay? Something that's made up of flat sides. But let's do that, and I'm going to show you a fun way to rig this up, okay? I'm going to make Command Y and just make a new background color. That's nice, okay? Oops. And drop that down to the bottom, and I'll lock that off. Okay, so in order to do this, I'm going to take my rectangle tool, and I'm going to choose a rectangle, and I'm going to get into the center here, and I'm going to make a square. So I'm going to hold down on Shift and Command and Option. And now if we look at this here, okay, the size of this rectangle, what we want to make the math easier on this is just a nice even number like 400, okay? So great. And now what I'm going to do is call that front, and I'm going to make that 3D. So far, so good, okay? So I'm going to duplicate this, and now I'm going to call this left, all right? And I need to now move the anchor point, right? So I'm going to grab my pan behind tool, and I'm going to move this over to the left, and I'm going to click it onto the side there, and just really want to make sure that that is exactly on the edge, okay? And now, I'll zoom back a little bit, and I want to rotate this, okay? And if I'm going to make this the left side, I need to rotate this 90 degrees along the y-axis, right? Turning it like that, like a carousel. And let's see, there we go. And I actually need it to be negative 90, all right? And I'm going to dial that number in exactly, right? And now I'm going to take this, and I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to call this right, okay? And this is pretty easy, because I just need to, this is kind of rotated in the right way. Now I need to do is move the position. Now, who knows how many pixels I need to move the position? That's right, 400 pixels, because this square is 400 pixels big in every direction, right? So I need to move it along the x-axis 400 pixels, right? And the first thing that I need to remember is that you can always type mathematical functions in here, which makes it way easier. So I can just type plus 400, and it'll move it precisely into the right spot, okay? Yay for math. Now, let's kind of do that again, and take the front and duplicate that, okay? And let's call that the top. And I'm going to take that, and I'm going to rotate that this way, right? Click that into there, just make sure I'm right on the edge. Great. And now I need to rotate this along the x-axis, like the hot dog. Sorry, I brought that up. And let's see, I need this to go back. So I need this to be 90, okay? And then same as the right left, I'm going to duplicate this top, and I'll call that my bottom. And I will now move that. That's right, 400 pixels on the y-axis, right? So I just need to get in here and type plus, oops, that was minus, plus 400. Boom, and it is down there, okay? So basically, we've already made the cube. And what I want to do is just get in here and give everything like a different color. All right, the yellow is fine for the front, and just so we can kind of distinguish these, I'm just going to quickly just pull different color values for them. And this will be a lot easier to see, I promise. Okay. And let me make that like orange or whatever. Awesome. So now, so far so good. What I need to do is make a new null object, okay? And I need to make that 3D. Now, let's look at this. Let me pull back, and let's look at this again in our two views, right? So now, if we look at this here, we can see that we're looking at the top, and we're looking at the top part of the cube. And the null, right now, it's in the center here, but but it's not in the center of the whole cube, which is kind of where we want this, okay? So what I need to do is take this, obviously I think at this point, and now I need to move this back along the z-axis 200 pixels, okay? And because this is 400 pixels, so if it starts there, now it's exactly in the center in every way, right? Because it's like if we look at it from the top, it's in the center, and if we look at it from the front, it's in the center. So it's like right in the center of the cube, which is awesome. And let me call this my cube control. Oops, I wrote cube. I wrote cube control. And I can take all of my layers and parent it now to the cube control, and now I can lock all those, right? And now the cube control controls my cube, which is pretty awesome. So let me get in here, and I think I only need to look at things with one view now, all right? And here's my rotation for the cube, and let's try this out. Boom, 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 right? Now we have a fully... Oh, I'm missing... Oh, I never made a back. Whoops. Sorry, got a little ahead of myself there. Let me rotate that everything back down there and take my front. I don't know if you saw that, but I had a missing section there because I forgot that there's a back on the cube as well. So I'm going to take my front and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'll call this my back. And this is really easy too. All I need to do is move this now. That's right. 200. Let's see. Yeah, so this is now at negative 200, so I need to move this 400 back. Let's see, and I need to move this way. Okay, so I need to move this back to, it was at negative 200, so I needed to move it to 200. That makes sense. And let's just make sure by rotating the cube. And no, it's not there. So I need to maybe, oh, I made that 20, sorry. There we go, now it's in place. Duh. Now I can lock those two off again, and there we go. There's the rotation that I meant to show, and it's a perfectly formed 3D cube, right? And that's really cool. We can rotate it any way we want. So you can actually model 3D objects. The engine will handle it. It's just that you can't actually model anything that's really rounded. Like, you'd have to make like a billion like little flat planes to do that, to make like a sphere or something. And I don't know how you'd ever get that math right. I don't know. But I did want to show you one other thing about how to control this while we're here. This is kind of fun. All right. So what I'm going to do is I can actually now pretty much just shy off all my layers except for my control. And I can make a... Let's see, on my cube control, I'm going to go up here to Effect and select Expression Controls, and I'm going to choose an Angle Control. And that gives you that familiar thing like this, you know, which you see a lot in After Effects. Right now it's not linked to anything though, right? And what I would do is I would duplicate this so that I have 3 copies, and I would call this X, and I would call this Y, okay? And I would call this Z. And then all you have to do is get down here into your cube control, press R to show the rotation, and we're just going to link this all up with some expressions, right? So I'm going to option click on the X rotation and get the pick whip here, and I'm going to pick whip that up to this. And now all that means is whatever angle this is at is now whatever angle the X rotation is at, right? It's going to correspond exactly. So now I'm going to do the same for X and Y. I'm going to make option on the stopwatch rather, and then bring this over here to the Y angle, and for the Z, I'm going to option click and then pick whip to the Z angle. Great. And now I can close that down. So what I can do now here is make it rotate that way, right? Which is a little bit easier, I feel like. Possibly. It's just give you these 3 controls, and now you could just like make keyframes for those and go forward into the future and just basically like, you know, twirl this, and you can make like a kind of a tumbling box action like this. Woohoo! Right? And yeah, I think that's really fun and pretty easy. And you can always take that like a whole other step if you want. All right, check this out. So I'm actually going to set the rotation for a second. I do that here. I'll just reset that and reset that and reset that. Right? Now they're to the center. And let me look at the scale for 1 sec. So if I unchain the scale, the null is right in the center. As you remember, we put it there. So if I rotate this a little bit so we can see what we're doing here, now if I scale it along the X, Y, or Z axis, I get stuff like this, right? I built like now a changeable rectangle that can be longer or thinner or narrow or whatever you want, right? So that's really, really fun. And this can actually still completely rotate, obviously. And yeah, so that's like a really cool 3D object that you can make in After Effects. And you could do a lot with that, actually. So that's really fun. And yeah, that's just a real overview of some basic 3D stuff that you can do in After Effects. Like I said, it gives you the different X, Y, and Z values for position and rotation and scale, right? And anchor point too. And you can just do some really cool stuff with it. It's limited basically in that you can't really model anything fully spherical or rounded, but it's not limited in that you can do a lot with it, including what most people do, I think, is distribute 2D layers in 3D space and make really cool animations that way. So don't forget, I really don't think you need to make a camera ever at this point in your career. I think that's very advanced and not often that helpful. And other than that, I definitely urge you to play around with 3D and have fun with it, okay? Hope this made sense, and I'll see you in the next video.
If you had a microscope and could look at a piece of a leaf, you would see thousands of tiny openings which branch out until the leaf has all of the materials it needs. What happens now?